This is a 1975 British Leyland minivan. You can tell because the only badge on it is this one on the hood, and it says Mini, and it has the British Leyland emblem. Over the 60s, 70s, and 80s, these cars had various different owners. So you could have a British Motor Corporation, or you could have British Leyland, or you could have Austin Rover, and they were pretty much making the same minis and the same minivans. In 1982, I contacted a fellow in London who sold mini parts at one of the big mini parts dealers, and said, "Hey, I heard you want a 55 Chevy and I want a minivan." And like 3 weeks later, he had purchased this van, and I was searching for him a 55 Chevy. He kept the van for a while and made some improvements to it, and I suspect he was also driving out the tax year on it, because when I received it almost 6 months later, it was just 2 days after the tax had run out. So I think he was doing that too, but it's fine because I ended up all the better for it. So when I received it, I had to do improvements because I was bringing it in the front door in full vision of the EPA and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And the EPA at that time was given a one-time pass on imports that were 5 years or more, but we did have to get approval from the safety area, and since this is a truck, we were able to have a little bit less standards than others, but did have to make some changes because of them. But when I received it, it looked pretty much like this, a little rougher, but not much. Didn't have a lot of rust. It did have these wheels on it. These are the Cooper S Steelies, or the reversed version. And then we have recently replaced it with new tires, and that are the appropriate size. It still has the drum brakes that it came with, other than when we refurbished this 2 years ago, it got completely new from the from the backing plate. Everything attached to the backing plate were all new at all four corners. All the rubber hoses were new, and all the master cylinders were new. The car had set for 20 years when I had decided I was doing other things other than playing with minis. When it was still in England and my new pen pal Keith was driving it, it had this door skin was replaced and resprayed by a friend of his. Keith was calling in favors, working in the mini business. He evidently had lots of friends and lots of favors, and when we talk about what he did to the motor, you'll hear even more. And then inside, it's close to how I received it. Oh, there's the door pocket, showing why we have door pockets in minis. It had the small steering wheel when I received it, the tachometer. It had actually 2 extra gauges there, and one of those had broken over the years, so since I had a new bezel from a 1275 GT, I went ahead and put that in when we refurbished the car, and put in the oil pressure gauge and temp gauge there. And then of course the surrounds are all new from our friends at Newton Commercial. And otherwise, certainly the wiper switch I had to replace back then because of the safety laws, said you had to have a 2-speed wiper, and this only had a 1-speed wiper. But as a commercial Mini, you have very plain seats. The passenger seat on the left is original to the car. The driver's seat, when I received it, was a different upholstery, and it was obviously from a later car, but we had it reupholstered at refurbished time with the same type of material they used when it was new, and everything's replaced in it, from the springs, diaphragms, everything. So the frame's the only thing that's original. Carpet was replaced when it was refurbed. One of the things I had to do for the safety laws was have approved latches. This is not the original Mini latch. They were quite different. They did not meet the safety rules, so I had a team of welders and not really engineers, but certainly machinists that helped me out on that, and so we incorporated a approved latch into the Mini, and there we go. It shuts, it opens, and it was approved, and that's what I needed, or I was gonna lose my $10,000 bond, which was a big deal to me. The rear corner, I'll back up a little bit, but the rear corner, when we went to refurb it, had rust. All this panel was pretty much gone underneath the filler, where dirt and water had parked up under it. So a lot of work was done to this. I had driven this as a second car for like 8 years after we got it. And driving in the Midwest, there certainly was rain, snow, and all that typical crud that happens. This is what makes it a truck. Hello, get an echo. It must be a truck. This has many vans had a steel floor. This one has a wooden with metal surrounds, which is great because now you can get to a spare tire back here, and when you'll see later, we can get to the area behind the front seats and have lots of storage there as well. These doors, when we refurbed it, had rust in the bottom of the doors. You're not going to be able to see it, but we were able to buy new panels that were like half panels that just took the whole bottom of the door and replaced it. Unfortunately, we had an amazing fabricator who was able to do all that work. And we had a van that looks pretty darn good for being this age. Now, proving that I probably shouldn't be driving a right-hand vehicle anymore at my age, I managed to put a little dent in it after all that work was done, which is my mark on being a stupid old guy. The exhaust system was an RC40 when I received it, which was the hot setup in those days, and still is if you look at all the ads for Mini parts. And it, for the most part, has survived other than the rear muffler, and we did not replace it with the original type of muffler. It's just a muffler. This area also had some rust in it. The gas tank had to be replaced because it was rusted out. The rear subframe was replaced, again because of rust, and which meant a lot of things attached to the subframe were not upgraded, but certainly replaced when we refurbed it 2 years ago. Over on the passenger side, again, we still have our replacement things. Let's see, I think the lighting may be to our advantage. We can see under the board here is storage and the battery, which may not be visible. Sorry. I wanted to be in control of the sun today, but it just didn't happen. Okay, back in the front. When we refurbed it, front fenders and nose piece were all rusted out and had to be replaced. So they are all new and have been replaced, and subsequent work done to make that happen. Under the hood, when I received it, this is the same engine that was in it almost 40 years ago. It is not the original engine. The original engine, as this vehicle was delivered, was an 850. This is a 998 engine. Keith is a guy named Keith Calvers, who after he sold me this, he got busy writing tech articles on Minis for Mini Magazine, and he now has his own tuning business where he builds and sells heads for racing minis, and quite the knowledgeable mini guy. Well, anyway, while he was putting in a new engine, decided he'd go ahead and swap the head, put a 998 Cooper S head on it. It's got the Cooper S type exhaust manifold. The intake manifold has been replaced. The carburetor has been tuned and jetted to match that. The air filter inside this box was switched to a K&N cleanable filter. That filter still lives in there and has been cleaned and re-oiled and ready to work. And it has can't quote the number, but a performance cam in it that Keith put in there. At the front, he put the double row chain for the cam drive. Things that he didn't tell me about that I learned later when we rebuilt the engine, when we refurbed the car. The distributor is a modified 45D Lucas with the vacuum advance removed and it retuned to be centrifugal advance only. Took the clutch apart and found out it had a lightweight flywheel, which was a British Leyland Special Tuning Road and Rally lightweight flywheel, and then a matching pressure plate that went with that, lightweight. So there was a lot done before I got it to the motor, which makes it a pretty peppy 1 liter. And then when we rebuilt it, it got all new bearings, new rings, of course. The head had to be replaced with the same Cooper S head, but one that wasn't all burnt up, and got, of course, a valve job, and then new exhaust valves, and then appropriate seals, and pretty much everything else, along with a new clutch. New radiators in here. There's the new master cylinders. This is not the original wiper, as I mentioned earlier, I had to replace that and put a 2-speed wiper in to be legal with the government when I was bringing it in. I did get my bond released and did not go to jail and did not get the car crushed and all those other nasty things that could have happened. So I still have it, but I've only driven it a couple hundred miles in the last year after having it rebuilt, so it's time to move it on. So if you're interested, this little guy is up for sale.